In tonight's episode, we're diving into three of the most chilling tales ever whispered across Japan. Stories that still echo through temples, alleyways, and lonely hotel rooms. And one of them is about a woman whose name you should never speak near water. They call it the curse of Oiwa. She had a pure heart, a kind smile, the kind of woman who prayed for others even when her own world was falling apart. But that purity was twisted, poisoned, betrayed. And when she died, she didn't just leave behind a body. She left behind a face, a presence, a curse. They say her spirit shows up in mirrors, in the folds of curtains, or in dreams that feel too real. And if you see her, one eye melted, one side of her mouth still whispering, "It's already too late." The story begins in Edo-era Japan, a time of flickering lanterns, paper walls, and silence so heavy it made your thoughts feel loud. Oiwa was known across her neighborhood for her kindness. Soft-spoken, devout, the kind of woman who bowed a little deeper at the shrine and offered warmth to strangers before herself. She lived in a modest home tucked behind a moss-covered temple. Her husband, Aiman, was a ronin, a masterless samurai, proud, restless, always chasing something just out of reach. At first, their marriage was quiet and content. But ambition has sharp teeth, and when a local nobleman offered Aiman a chance at wealth and status, if only he were free to remarry, he didn't hesitate. He poisoned Oiwa slowly. A powder slipped into tea. Just enough to warp her skin, melt part of her face, make her voice slur. Her left eye never closed again. Still, she remained loyal, still loved him, until she caught sight of her reflection, and everything shattered. Since then, no one has lived in that house for long. Doors slam at night, mirrors crack without warning. And every now and then, someone walking past the old property says they feel watched, not by eyes, but by something colder, older. They say the curse doesn't stay in one place. It follows the story, lingers in retellings, so when you speak her name, or even hear it, something opens, something remembers. And it's never really gone. Years later, long after the house had been abandoned and half swallowed by vines, a group of university students decided to film a short horror documentary. One of them, Kenji, had a fascination with old ghost stories, and Oiwa's legend was the one that always haunted him most. So, when he found the location of her actual home, untouched and hidden behind overgrown trees near the outskirts of Edo, he convinced 3 of his friends to come with him. The walk there felt strange from the beginning. The air turned still. The cicadas stopped buzzing. One of the students joked that it felt like the woods were listening. No one laughed. They reached the house just after noon. It looked like it had grown out of the earth, weathered wood, a crooked roof, and a door slightly open, like it had been waiting. Kenji stepped in first. His friends followed. Inside, the air was thick, almost wet. Tatami mats curled at the edges. Dust floated like ash in the beams of sunlight. But the strangest part was how quiet it was. No birds, no wind. Just the sound of their own footsteps and breathing. They began filming, setting up a camera in what had once been the main room. That's when one of them, Yuto, noticed something odd. There was a mirror in the corner, cracked across the middle. Not unusual, except it wasn't reflecting the room correctly. A cup that sat on a table didn't appear in the mirror at all. And when Yuto moved his hand in front of it, the reflection lagged. Kenji thought it was just an old glass defect, but then they heard something. A soft, dragging sound, like something being pulled across the floor in the next room. They froze. No one moved. Then, silence again. They called out. No answer. Kenji, still filming, turned the camera toward the hallway. That's when the temperature dropped. Fast. And in the mirror, Oiwa's name appeared. Not written, not scratched, just fogged into the glass, as if someone had breathed it there seconds ago. No one said a word. But from that moment on, the house no longer felt abandoned. Kenji tried to laugh it off, said it was probably a prank, condensation on the mirror, or maybe one of them did it without realizing, but no one else was smiling. Yuto was pale, the others were quiet. They agreed to finish filming quickly and get out. As they moved deeper into the house, the air grew colder. Not winter cold, but the kind that sinks into your bones and makes your hands shake without you noticing. The hallway felt longer than it should have, like it stretched with every step. In one of the back rooms, they found something unexpected. An altar. Simple, dusty, but untouched. Candles melted halfway down. A tiny wooden comb. And in the center, an old portrait. The image was faded, but the shape of the face was unmistakable. One side smooth, the other sunken, collapsing, like it was slipping off the canvas. As Kenji stepped closer, the door behind them slammed shut. Hard. No wind, no draft, just a sharp, final sound. They rushed back to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Yuto began panicking, pulling at the handle, while Kenji kept filming, whispering that maybe they were meant to see something. Maybe this was part of it. That's when the whispering started. Faint at first, coming from the walls, from under the floor, from nowhere. A woman's voice, raspy and broken, repeating the same word, over and over. Aimen. Kenji froze. That was the name of Oiwa's husband, the one who betrayed her. Then something moved. In the reflection of the glass display case, they saw it. A pale face, low to the ground. Hair dragging, one eye wide open, watching them from behind. They turned. No one there. But something had changed. Yuto began muttering to himself, backing away from the altar. Said he saw her blink. Said her mouth moved. Kenji told him to calm down, but Yuto suddenly shoved him. Hard. Screaming that they weren't supposed to be here, that someone followed them in. When they finally forced the door open, it didn't creak. It didn't resist. It just let go. Outside, the sky had darkened. The woods were silent again, but now none of them felt alone. They stumbled out of the house, gasping for air like they'd been underwater. But the relief was short-lived, because just a few steps into the woods, they realized something was wrong. Yuto was shaking. Kenji tried to use his phone's GPS, but the screen glitched, froze, then blinked white. The time read 3:33, even though it had just been afternoon. One of the others swore they could still hear the whispering, but farther now, echoing through the trees like it was chasing them. Then they saw her. Not fully, just a glimpse. Behind the trees, between the branches, half a face, half a smile. Kenji lifted his camera without thinking and hit record. The lens zoomed slightly and caught it again. A figure, pale, slowly crawling, not walking, crawling. Hair, dragging like seaweed, wet and clumped, clinging to the forest floor. Then the camera shut off. Dead battery, fully drained. They ran. No plan, no direction. Just pure instinct. But the woods seemed to bend around them. Every turn looked the same. Every landmark vanished. That's when they found the shrine. Small, broken, hidden beneath a veil of spiderwebs, but something about it felt important, familiar, like it had been part of the house once. Inside, they found a message, carved into rotted wood. Return what was taken. No one knew what it meant, but Yuto did. His hands were bleeding. He reached into his bag and pulled out the comb, the one from Oiwa's altar. He didn't remember taking it, said it was just in there. The moment he placed it back in the shrine, the air shifted. Still, cold, then quiet. No wind, no whispers, just silence. But Kenji didn't breathe easy, because in the reflection of the shrine's polished offering bowl, he saw her, closer than ever. They didn't speak on the way back. No one did. The trail had reappeared, just like that, leading them back to the edge of town. As if the forest had never shifted at all, as if nothing had happened. But something had. Back at the university, Kenji reviewed the footage. Most of it was static, distorted frames, glitches, but one clip played clearly. The moment they were inside the house, standing near the altar, and in the background, Oiwa's voice. Faint, clear, repeating the same line over and over again. You took what was mine. Kenji remembered the inscription on the shrine. Return what was taken. He zoomed in on the comb Yuto had found in his bag. Same one from the altar. Same carved initials. It hadn't just ended up there. Something wanted it back. Something followed them to make sure it was returned. The group tried to move on. They never spoke of it publicly. But 2 weeks later, Kenji got a call. Yuto was missing. Last seen entering the film department's editing suite, the cameras caught him going in, but not coming out. All they found was a smudged mirror in the corner of the room. And in the condensation, as if drawn by a fingertip, a single drooping eye. Authorities said it was just a prank, maybe he ran away. But Kenji knew better. They all did. The shrine, the curse, the message, it wasn't about scaring them. It was about balance, about taking only what you're given and giving back what isn't yours. Oiwa wasn't just a ghost. She was a memory that demanded respect, a wound that never healed, a face the world tried to forget until it looked back. And once she's seen you, you're never quite alone again. Kenji never touched a camera again. He dropped out of school, moved cities, changed his number. But no matter where he went, mirrors made him uneasy. He covered them, avoided reflections, never looked too long. One night, months later, he received a package. No return address. Inside was a single item, the comb. Old, dusty, but somehow warm. Like it had just been held. There was no note, just a smear of fog across the inside of the box. And pressed into that fog, barely visible unless the light hit it just right, a smile, crooked, half melted. Kenji burned the box the same night, but that didn't stop the dreams. And now, every time he walks past still water, ponds, puddles, even a rain-slicked sidewalk, he looks away. Because once, just once, he glanced down and saw someone else blink from the inside of the reflection. The story of Oiwa is just one of many in Japan where the dead don't stay silent and the past refuses to stay buried. But she's not the only one. Some curses are tied to a name, others to a place. A place so hidden, so erased from records, that it shouldn't exist at all. And yet, people still find it. Not on purpose. Never on purpose. Tonight's second story takes us north, deep into the Aomori prefecture, where there's a village you'll never see on a map. A village officials deny ever existed. But travelers talk, and the ones who've returned, they say the worst part isn't getting lost. It's realizing the village remembers you, even after you leave. It started as a side trip. Aya was a photographer in her late 20s, traveling through northern Japan for a landscape project. Her goal was simple: capture forgotten places, towns that time left behind. Abandoned shrines, weathered farmhouses, roads that led nowhere. She wasn't chasing ghost stories, just silence, stillness. But somewhere between two marked towns in Aomori Prefecture, her GPS froze. The signal vanished. She checked her paper map. Nothing matched. And then the fog rolled in. It wasn't soft or gentle. It clung to the car like wet cloth. Thick, heavy. She rolled down the window just enough to hear nothing. No birds, no wind. Just a strange stillness that felt wrong. She turned a bend and saw it. A small wooden sign, hand-painted. Faded letters read, Sugisawa. The road narrowed into dirt, and the trees felt too close, too quiet. But the village was there, small, sunken, like it was hiding in plain sight. Aya stepped out, camera in hand. Every instinct told her to turn back, but the light filtering through the fog was unreal, perfect, like the village was frozen in time. She walked past a broken gate, saw a row of homes with doors ajar, tatami mats curled, teacups still on tables, as if everyone had simply vanished mid-step. And as she raised her camera to take the first shot, the shutter clicked, but the screen stayed black, and somewhere in the distance, she heard something move. Not an animal, not wind. A voice, speaking a name she hadn't told anyone. Aya took a few steps deeper into the village, camera slung over her shoulder, unease growing with every crunch of gravel beneath her boots. The fog didn't lift eft, it thickened, like it was following her, wrapping around her ankles. She paused in front of a house with its sliding door half open. Inside, a set of sandals was still neatly placed at the entrance. A coat hung by the doorway. It felt lived in, not abandoned. Aya called out, just in case. No answer. She stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath her, but not sharply, more like they sighed. The interior was clean, too clean. Not a single cobweb. No dust. The tea set on the table still had dried leaves inside, like someone had poured a cup and never drank it. She raised a camera. Clicked. Still nothing. The shutter worked, but the screen stayed black. She tried again. Nothing. Then, her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. No preview text. Just one word when she opened it. Leave. She froze, had no signal, no service. How did that message even come through? Then she heard it. A knock. Not at the door behind her. At the window. She turned slowly, but all she saw was fog, thick and pressed against the glass like something was breathing on the other side. She stepped back, heart thudding, and knocked over a stool behind her. As it hit the ground, the sound echoed far too loud, like it had hit stone, not wood. And from somewhere outside, a voice responded, a whisper, soft, in an old dialect. Words she didn't recognize, but tones she understood. It was warning her, or welcoming her. She wasn't sure which was worse. Aya stepped outside again. The village felt smaller now, closer. And in the distance, where there had been nothing but trees before, she saw a new house. No fog around it. Door wide open. A dim light glowing from inside. She hadn't seen that one when she arrived. She was sure of it. Aya didn't want to go near the new house. Everything in her body screamed to turn around. But the fog behind her had thickened into a wall. The path she came from was no longer visible. Her only option was forward. She approached the house slowly, camera still hanging uselessly from her neck. The light inside flickered. Not like electricity, more like firelight. A candle, maybe. She stepped through the doorway and immediately noticed the smell. Not rot, not mold. Incense. Freshly lit. The room was lined with faded photographs. Black and white portraits all nailed to the walls. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, all unsmiling. Their eyes scratched out. Every single one. Aya raised her flashlight. In the center of the room stood a low table with an old leather notebook resting on it. She opened it carefully. Inside were names, pages and pages of them. Some crossed out, some still untouched. And on the most recent page, her name, Aya, written in red ink. She backed away, handshaking, and that's when she saw the figure standing at the far end of the room. An old woman, thin, with long white hair and skin like dried paper. She didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there, staring. Aya whispered a greeting. The woman tilted her head. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped, voice like gravel. "This place remembers." Aya asked what this place was, what had happened here. The woman didn't answer, just raised a trembling finger and pointed at the photographs. Everyone who takes something loses more. Aya didn't understand. She hadn't taken anything. She hadn't touched the notebook. She turned to put it back, but the table was gone. So was the door. She was no longer in a house. She was outside again, but not where she had entered. The sky had turned a sickly red. The buildings around her were crumbling, burning, and, faintly, beneath the crackle of unseen flames, the whispers returned, chanting, repeating one word, Sugisawa. Aya ran. She didn't know where to, just away. But every turn led her deeper into something that wasn't the village anymore. The houses twisted as she passed them, walls bending, windows blinking like eyes. The sky rippled above her like water. She stopped in a clearing where the fog was thinner. Dozens of stone markers stood in crooked rows, graves unmarked, some freshly disturbed. She turned to leave and saw herself standing across the clearing. Same face, same clothes, same camera, but the expression was wrong. Blank, staring. And slowly, the other Aya tilted her head and smiled. Only half her mouth moved. Aya stumbled back, and the camera around her neck flashed, untriggered. The screen flickered back to life, showing a photo that hadn't been there before. A photo of the village burning. People screaming, and in the center, frozen mid-step, was her. Not the other version, her. Aya looked up, and all around her, the graves were open, empty. The soil looked wet, but not from rain. Something was climbing out. Hands, pale, silent. She backed up and felt something slip into her hand. The notebook. Again, the pages flipped on their own. Her name was still there, but now underneath it, her address, her hometown, her parents' names. She dropped it. It vanished before it hit the ground. Then, all at once, the village changed. The buildings repaired themselves. The sky turned soft and grey. The fog retreated like a held breath. She was standing at the entrance again. The dirt road stretched ahead. Escape. But she didn't move, because just beyond the trees, she saw the figure again. The old woman, watching, smiling, mouthing the same words, over and over. You brought it home. Aya drove for hours without stopping. Her hands shook on the wheel. She didn't look in the rearview mirror once, not even when the sun came up, not even when her phone started working again. By the time she reached the nearest town, she convinced herself it had all been a hallucination, a fog-induced nightmare, something her mind created from fear and isolation. She checked into a small inn and locked the door behind her, took a long, silent shower, tried to forget. But when she plugged in her camera to transfer the files, her stomach dropped. Hundreds of photos she never took. All of Sugisawa. All from angles she couldn't have reached. Aerial shots, faces up close, graves being dug, flames frozen midair, and in nearly every frame, her, standing, staring back at the lens. Then came the sound. Not from her laptop. From the hallway. Someone whispering her name. She opened the door. No one was there, except for a single rock on the floor. Dark, smooth, still damp. The kind that lined the paths in Sugisawa. Panicked. She packed her things and left the inn. Went home. Told herself she'd never go near the mountains again. But things didn't go back to normal. The lights in her apartment flickered at odd hours. Her phone buzzed with unknown calls, always at 3:33. And the mirror in her hallway began to fog, even when the air was dry. One night, she returned home to find her front door open. On her kitchen table, the notebook. Same red ink, same names. And now, A new list beneath hers. People she knew. Her sister. Her best friend. Her landlord. The curse hadn't stayed behind. It had followed her out. Aya burned the notebook the next morning. She didn't wait. Just poured lighter fluid into the sink, dropped the pages in, and watched them curl into black ash. The flames hissed, spit, then died. But the names, they didn't disappear. That night, her sister called, crying. Said she woke up in a house that wasn't hers. Old wooden floors, fog outside the windows, the smell of incense in the air. Aya told her to get out, but the line went dead. She rushed over, found the apartment dark, cold, empty. No sign of a struggle, no trace of anyone. Except for the camera. Her camera, sitting neatly on the kitchen counter. She picked it up, heart pounding, opened the display. Only one photo. Her sister, standing in the middle of Sugisawa, smiling. And behind her, rows of open graves, all waiting. Some curses are tied to betrayal, others to forgotten places. But the next one, it walks. It follows. Oiwa's rage lingered in mirrors. Sugisawa's silence pulled victims back into its soil. But this story lives on crowded streets, empty alleyways, the space just behind your shoulder. You've probably heard the stories, told as a joke, passed around schoolyards. A woman with a perfect voice, a polite question, a mask. But the thing about urban legends in Japan, the more people say they're fake, the more real they seem to become. Our final story tonight takes us to the edges of the city, right as the sun disappears behind the buildings. Because that's when she appears. Not in forests, not in haunted houses, but just behind you. Asking one simple question. Am I pretty? The city was loud, neon, constant. But Ray had grown up here. He was used to it. The sound of crosswalks chirping, the hum of vending machines, the way the streets stayed alive long after midnight. He was a college student majoring in urban folklore, collecting stories for his thesis. The kind passed down from kids, whispered in schoolyards, scribbled into margins of textbooks. His current obsession? Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. He'd heard the usual. She wears a surgical mask, asks if she's pretty, and depending on your answer, you're either cut or cursed. Most dismissed her as a ghost story for children. But Ray had found something strange. Reports. Real ones. Hidden in police archives. Cases dismissed as accidents. Slashed faces. Missing people. All near the same alley in Suganami Ward. So one night, just after twilight, he went there. Alone. It was a narrow side street tucked behind an old convenience store. Flickering lights. Graffiti peeled off the walls. The kind of place people avoid without knowing why. He wasn't scared. Not yet. He brought his camera. A flashlight. A few caramels in his coat pocket. An old superstition to confuse her if things went wrong. And as he stepped into the alley, the city noise dimmed behind him. No footsteps. No cars. Just stillness. And the sound of something light, fabric maybe, brushing against concrete up ahead. Then silence again. He raised his flashlight and saw the outline of a woman standing very, very still. Ray squinted into the dark, heart ticking faster than he'd admit. The woman was maybe 20 feet ahead, slim, dressed in a beige coat, black hair tied neatly back. Her face was hidden behind a white surgical mask, common enough in the city. But she wasn't moving. Not an inch. He called out softly, asking if she needed help. No reply. He took a step forward, flashlight shaking just a little. The beam caught her shoes. Immaculate. White. Too clean for a back alley like this. Then she spoke. Softly. Polite. Am I pretty? Ray stopped. A chill slid down his spine. He wasn't expecting that. Not exactly. He forced a nervous laugh, more to himself than to her, said, "Yeah, you are," trying to keep it light. She tilted her head, just a little. Then she asked again, "Even like this?" And in one slow motion, she reached up and pulled down her mask. Her mouth stretched from ear to ear, jagged, torn. Not a surgical cut, ripped like it had been done in rage, lips split open permanently into a smile that didn't match her eyes. She took one step forward. That's when Ray dropped the flashlight. It clattered to the ground, casting spinning shadows across the alley. When he picked it up again, she was gone. Gone? But the air still felt full, pressurized, as if someone was still standing right next to him. Ray backed up fast, heart hammering, then ran out of the alley and didn't stop until he reached a train station. But the moment he stepped onto the platform, his phone buzzed. Unknown number, no message, just a photo. Of him, standing in the alley, taken from behind, and in the background, barely visible, was the edge of a beige coat. Still watching. Ray didn't sleep that night. He kept checking his phone, deleting the photo, then finding it back in his gallery minutes later. Same framing. Same timestamp. Same soft blur behind his shoulder. The next day, he visited a local librarian, an old woman named Sato-san who had helped him find obscure urban myths in the past. When he mentioned Kuchisake Onna, her face stiffened. "You shouldn't chase her," she said. "She's not a ghost. She's a question. And questions always come back." Ray asked if there was any way to stop her. She handed him a scrap of paper. A phrase written in old kanji. "Say this when she asks. It confuses her. Buys you time." He tried to laugh it off, but she didn't smile. "One more thing," she added. "If you start seeing masks where they don't belong, leave immediately." That night, Ray found a surgical mask hanging on the doorknob of his apartment. He didn't own any. He looked through the peephole. No one was there. He turned on every light, checked every room, nothing. But in the corner of his mirror, just for a second, he thought he saw hair moving. He tried to sleep, but around 3 a.m., he woke up to a sound. Soft, deliberate, footsteps. From his hallway, he grabbed his camera and turned it on. The screen flickered, then showed him footage that hadn't been recorded. A video. He was lying in bed, sleeping. The footage had been taken from inside his room, from the foot of the bed, and the last frame, before it cut to black, was her face inches away from his. She was smiling, that same awful smile. He dropped the camera, and behind him, somewhere in the kitchen, he heard a soft voice, polite as ever. "Am I pretty?" Ray didn't answer. He couldn't. His mouth had gone dry, his body frozen halfway between fight and flee. He stood there in the doorway to his kitchen, staring at nothing, because she wasn't visible. Not directly. But her presence was unmistakable. The room was ice cold. The kind of cold that sinks into your teeth. Slowly, he backed toward his desk. The paper Sato-san had given him was still there, the phrase written in old kanji. His fingers shook as he tried to sound it out. Behind him, he heard the sound of fabric shifting. Then, a breath. Warm. Close. Right behind his ear. He turned. Nothing. But on the wall now, someone had scrawled words using what looked like lipstick or blood. He wasn't sure. Wrong answer. That's when every mirror in the apartment shattered at once. Every single one. Ray dropped to the floor, covered his head, heart racing so loud it drowned out his thoughts. When he looked up, his apartment was different. Dim. Silent. The windows were bricked over. His phone was gone. The air smelled like hospital corridors, clean, sharp, and wrong. He stood, slowly, and walked toward the front door, opened it. But outside wasn't the hallway. It was the alley. The same one from 2 nights ago, but darker now, more twisted, like it had been waiting to finish what it started. And standing at the far end, half lit by a flickering streetlight, was Kuchisake Onna. Still, silent, mask gone. Her mouth stretched wide. But this time, she didn't ask. She just raised one hand, holding a mirror, and in it, Ray saw his own face, already carved. Ray didn't scream. He couldn't. The reflection stole the air from his lungs. His face in the mirror wasn't bleeding yet, but the cuts were there. Faint red lines stretching from the corners of his mouth as if drawn in advance. A preview. He stumbled back, blinked hard, and the mirror vanished. So did the alley. He was back in his apartment, except it wasn't exactly his anymore. Everything was slightly off. The walls were too clean, the air too still, no sounds from outside, no city noise. Just that same sterile quiet from hospital rooms or funeral homes. The lights flickered again, and then the paper from Sato-san reappeared, fluttering from beneath his door, but the phrase had changed. It no longer said the confusing answer. It said, "She's not asking you." Ray read it 3 times before it hit him. The curse didn't always end with a question. Sometimes it began with one. And if you answered wrong the first time, if you tried to lie, or flatter, or joke, she marked you, not for death, not immediately, but for a second meeting, one where the choice wasn't yours anymore. He remembered now, back in the alley, when she first asked, he'd said yes, said she was pretty, and that's why she followed him home. Why? She watched him sleep. Why? The mirrors cracked. The curse didn't feed on fear. It fed on vanity, the need to be polite, to say the right thing, to lie. And now, it wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. Because in the corner of his vision, he saw something move. Not her. Himself. Standing in the hallway. Smiling. Mouth already split. The next morning, Ray's apartment was quiet. Neighbors said they hadn't heard but his door was open. Light still on. And in the center of the room, his camera sat perfectly upright on the floor, still recording. Police found no signs of struggle. No blood. No prints, just a cracked mirror leaning against the wall, one that hadn't been there before. And on it, drawn in something dark, were the words, "Am I pretty now?" Ray was never found. But days later, his friends began getting strange deliveries. Plain white envelopes, no stamps, no return address. Inside each one, a surgical mask, neatly folded, still warm. And ever since, late at night, they swear they hear footsteps just outside their doors. Soft, slow, as if someone's waiting for them to open it. Just once. So she can ask the question all over again. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you like them and want to listen to more, feel free to subscribe and put on your notifications. I upload at least 3 times a week. Wish you all the best.